The mail order bride. Everyone mocked for her scars, until the blind rancher said she was the most beautiful woman he ever saw. What would you do if the world called you damaged, broken, unworthy of love, but one person saw past every scar to the truth beneath? In the harsh light of the Arizona Territory, 1892, where beauty is currency and a woman's face is her fortune, what happens when that currency is stolen by fire? But sometimes the eyes that see the clearest are the ones that have lost their sight. Before we discover how a woman marked by tragedy and a man touched by darkness found each other in the most unexpected way, take a moment to support this channel. If you believe that true beauty lives in the soul, not the skin, hit that like button, subscribe, and let us know in the comments what you think makes someone truly beautiful. Now, let's step into the unforgiving desert sun of Copper Ridge, Arizona. The stagecoach lurched to a stop in a cloud of red dust, and Josephine "Josie" Brennan pressed her gloved hand against the veil that covered the right side of her face. Through the thin black fabric, she could see the scattered buildings of Copper Ridge, a town that looked like it had been dropped carelessly into the desert and left to bake under the relentless sun. 27 years old, wearing a traveling dress of dark gray that had seen better days, Josie carried everything she owned in a single worn carpet bag. She also carried something else, something that had followed her for 3 years like a shadow. A secret hidden beneath silk and lace. A truth she'd tried to bury in the carefully worded letters she'd exchanged with Mr. Thomas Ashford, rancher, widower, and according to his advertisement, a man seeking companionship rather than perfection. She'd been honest about almost everything. Her age, her modest education, her skills in managing a household, even her lack of fortune. But she hadn't mentioned the fire. She hadn't described the night the tenement building in Philadelphia had gone up in flames, or how she'd gone back into the inferno to save the children trapped on the 3rd floor. She'd saved them all, but the cost was written across her skin in angry red marks that twisted from her right cheek down her neck and disappeared beneath her collar. The stage driver, a weathered man with kind eyes, helped her down. "Copper Ridge Hotel is just there, miss. Mind the heat. It'll steal your breath if you're not careful." Josie thanked him and made her way toward the wooden sidewalk, acutely aware of the stares that followed her. The veil marked her as different, mysterious, and in a small frontier town, different meant dangerous. She'd learned that lesson in a dozen towns between Philadelphia and Arizona. The hotel lobby was mercifully cool, shaded by thick adobe walls. A woman behind the desk looked up, her smile faltering as she noticed the veil. "Help you. I'm Josephine Brennan. I'm here to meet Mr. Thomas Ashford." The woman's expression shifted to something between pity and curiosity. "Mr. Ashford. Yes, he said you'd be arriving today. He sent word he'd be here at 4 o'clock. That's an hour yet. You can wait in the parlor." Josie settled into a chair by the window, watching the town move through its afternoon rhythms. Cowboys rode past, their horses kicking up dust. A woman with a parasol hurried across the street, her face pinched against the heat. Children chased a dog between buildings, their laughter bright and uncomplicated. She'd imagined this moment 1,000 times during the long journey west. Mr. Ashford's letters had been kind, thoughtful, even poetic. He wrote about the desert stars and the way the mountains turned purple at sunset. He wrote about loneliness and hope. He'd been clear that he wasn't looking for a young beauty or a society wife. "I need someone real," he'd written. "Someone who understands that life has sharp edges and that strength matters more than appearances." Those words had given her courage. But now, sitting in this stuffy parlor with curious eyes watching her veiled face, doubt crept in like the desert heat. When he saw her, when he understood what the veil hid, would he still see her as someone real? Or would he see only what everyone else saw? Damaged goods, a woman marked by misfortune? The door opened and a tall man entered, moving with careful deliberation. He was perhaps 35, with sun-bronzed skin and dark hair that curled slightly at his collar. His features were strong, handsome even, but it was his eyes that caught her attention. They were a striking gray-blue, clear and bright, yet they didn't quite focus on anything in particular. He held a walking stick in one hand, tapping it lightly against the floor as he moved. The woman at the desk called out, "Mr. Ashford, your guest is in the parlor." Thomas Ashford, the rancher who'd placed the advertisement, the man she'd traveled 2,000 miles to meet. And he was blind. Josie stood quickly, her heart hammering. He turned toward the sound of her movement, a gentle smile crossing his face. "Miss Brennan?" "Yes," she managed, her voice barely a whisper. "Mr. Ashford. Please call me Thomas." He moved toward her with surprising confidence, his stick finding the furniture with practiced ease. "May I?" He extended his hand. She placed her gloved hand in his, and he bowed over it with old-fashioned courtesy. "I'm glad you arrived safely. The journey must have been exhausting." "It was long," she admitted, studying his face. Up close, she could see a thin scar running from his left temple into his hairline. "But I'm here now. Would you like to take a walk? There's a garden behind the hotel. It's the coolest spot in town at this hour, and we could talk privately." He offered his arm. Josie hesitated only a moment before taking it. As they walked, she realized he didn't need much guidance. He knew the path, the turns, the obstacles. They settled on a bench beneath a sprawling mesquite tree, its filtered shade offering blessed relief. "I should explain," Thomas said, his voice steady but tinged with something like apology. "About my eyes. It wasn't in the advertisement because, well, I suppose I was afraid it would matter." "What happened?" Josie asked softly. "Accident 3 years ago. I was breaking a particularly stubborn horse, and he threw me into a fence post. Hit my head hard enough to crack my skull. Woke up in darkness and never saw light again." He smiled, but there was old pain in the expression. "Lost my wife that same year. Fever took her while I was still healing. By the time I could function again, I was alone." "I'm sorry," Josie said and meant it. "That's a heavy burden." "We all carry something," Thomas replied, turning his face toward her as if he could see her. "Your letters spoke of hardship, though you were careful not to give details. I recognize careful words. I've written enough of them myself." Josie's hand went unconsciously to her veil. Yes, I wasn't entirely forthcoming. Few people are when they're protecting something tender." His smile was gentle. "Would you like to tell me now, or would you prefer to wait until you know me better?" The kindness in his voice, the lack of judgment, made something crack open inside her chest. "There was a fire," she heard herself say. 3 years ago, in Philadelphia. I worked in a factory, lived in a tenement. One night, the building caught fire. There were children trapped upstairs. I went back for them." "Brave," Thomas said quietly. "Foolish," some said. "The fire took its toll. My right side, my face, my neck, my shoulder, the burns left scars. Significant scars. I wear this veil because people find them disturbing." Silence fell between them, broken only by the rustle of the mesquite leaves. Josie waited for the polite withdrawal, the careful words that would mean he was reconsidering their arrangement. Instead, Thomas said, "May I?" "May you what?" He lifted his hand slowly, giving her time to refuse. "May I see you? In my own way." Josie's breath caught. She understood what he was asking. Yes." With trembling fingers, she untied the veil and let it fall to her lap. The late afternoon sun touched her face, and she fought the urge to turn away, to hide the twisted skin that marked her as different. Thomas reached out, his fingers gentle as they found her face. He traced the line of her left cheek, smooth and unblemished, then moved to the right. His fingertips followed the ridges and valleys of scar tissue with the same tenderness, reading her features like others might read Braille. He mapped her forehead, her nose, her chin, and finally her neck where the scars disappeared beneath her collar. "You saved children," he said finally, his hand coming to rest against her unmarked cheek. "You ran into fire for them." "They were so small," Josie whispered, tears threatening. "I couldn't leave them." "Josephine Brennan," Thomas said, his gray-blue eyes steady on her face even though they couldn't see her. "You are the most beautiful woman I've ever had the privilege to meet." The tears came then, hot and unstoppable. "You can't see me." "I see you better than anyone with working eyes ever has," he replied firmly. "I see courage. I see sacrifice. I see a soul that values life over vanity. That's beauty, Josephine. Real beauty. The kind that lasts." "People stare," she managed through her tears. "They whisper. Children cry. Then they're fools who don't know what they're looking at." His thumb brushed away a tear from her smooth cheek. "I lost my sight, Josephine, but I gained something else. I learned to see what matters, and what I'm seeing right now in this garden is a woman who's been far braver than I ever was." "You don't have to say that to make me feel better." "I'm not." His voice was serious now. "I'm saying it because it's true. Your letters showed me your mind, your humor, your kindness. Now your story shows me your character. The scars? They're proof that when the world needed you, you didn't hesitate. How could that be anything but beautiful?" Josie sat in stunned silence. In 3 years, no one had spoken to her this way. People had been kind, pitying, uncomfortable, or cruel. But no one had called her beautiful. No one had touched her scars with tenderness. No one had seen past them to the person beneath. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "Say you'll stay," Thomas replied. "Give this a chance. Give us a chance. I won't pretend it'll be easy. The ranch is isolated, the work is hard, and I'm learning to navigate this blind life day by day. But I think we could be good for each other, Josephine. I think we could build something real." She looked at his face, at the sincerity written in every line, and felt something she hadn't felt in 3 long years. Hope. "I'll stay," she said. "I'd like to try." His smile transformed his face, making him look younger, lighter. "Then let's start with supper. Mrs. Henderson at the hotel sets a decent table, and we can talk about the ranch, about what life might look like." As they stood, Josie reached for her veil, but Thomas caught her hand. "You don't need that. Not with me. Never with me." "The other people? Let them look," Thomas said firmly. "Let them see a woman who's been to hell and back and came out stronger. You have nothing to hide, Josephine. Not from me, and not from anyone else who matters." She folded the veil and tucked it into her pocket, feeling strangely naked without it, but also, for the first time in years, free. The dining room was crowded with the evening meal crowd. As they entered, conversations paused. Eyes turned. Josie felt the familiar weight of stares, heard the intake of breath as people registered her scars. Thomas must have sensed her tension because he squeezed her arm. "Head high," he murmured. "You're with me." They took a table by the window. The whispers started almost immediately, but Thomas seemed oblivious, his attention focused entirely on her. They talked about the ranch, about his life before the accident, about her childhood in Philadelphia. He made her laugh with stories of stubborn cattle and a particularly clever horse that had learned to unlatch gates. Halfway through the meal, a woman approached their table. She was perhaps 40, dressed in respectable if plain clothing, with a kind face and worried eyes. "Mr. Ashford," she said quietly, "I'm Margaret Sullivan. I run the dress shop. I don't mean to intrude, but I wanted to say—" She turned to Josie. "You're very brave, miss. I lost my sister in a fire 5 years ago. She died because no one would go back for her. You saved children. That takes a special kind of courage." Josie felt her throat tighten. "Thank you. If you're staying in Copper Ridge, I'd be honored to know you." Margaret smiled. "We need more people like you in this town." As she walked away, Thomas reached across the table and found Josie's hand. See? Not everyone is blind to what matters, and those who are don't deserve your concern. But not everyone was Margaret Sullivan. The next morning, Thomas took Josie to see the ranch. It was 5 miles outside town, nestled in a valley where a spring-fed creek made the desert bloom. The main house was built of adobe and timber, with a wide porch that offered shade and a view of the distant mountains. Outbuildings dotted the property, a barn, a stable, a bunkhouse for the ranch hands. "It's beautiful," Josie breathed, taking in the cottonwood trees along the creek and the way the morning light painted everything gold. "I'm glad you think so," Thomas said. "I remember how it looks, every detail. Sometimes I stand on that porch and picture it all, trying to keep the colors fresh in my mind." 3 men emerged from the barn, ranch hands who'd worked for Thomas since before the accident. They introduced themselves as Carlos, an older Mexican vaquero with silver in his hair, Red, a young cowboy with freckles and an easy smile, and Jacob, a quiet black man with careful eyes. All 3 nodded respectfully to Josie, not reacting to her scars beyond a brief glance. Thomas had clearly prepared them. "The boys keep this place running," Thomas explained as they toured the property. "I handle the business side, the books and such. My hands can still do what my eyes can't, but I need someone to manage the house, to handle the things I can't do alone. More than that, I need companionship. These men are good workers and friends, but—" He trailed off, seeming embarrassed. "But they're not company for long winter evenings," Josie finished gently. Exactly. The house was neat, but clearly lacking a woman's touch. Dust gathered in corners, curtains hung limp and sun-faded, and the kitchen held only the barest essentials. But the bones were good. Sturdy furniture, a large fireplace, windows that let in generous light. "I can work with this," Josie said, already imagining what the space could become. They spent the day together, talking, planning, learning each other's rhythms. Thomas showed her how he navigated the house, the subtle markers he used, the way he'd organized everything so he could find it by touch. She watched him work, amazed by his competence. He might be blind, but he was far from helpless. That evening, as the sun set and painted the desert in shades of orange and purple, they sat on the porch together. "I should tell you," Thomas said slowly, "that marrying me won't be easy. This town has been kind, mostly, but there are those who see my blindness as weakness. They think I can't manage, that I'm vulnerable. And there's a man, Garrett Pierce, who's been pushing to buy this ranch. He owns most of the water rights in the valley and wants mine too. He's not a man who takes no for an answer." "Why haven't you sold?" Josie asked. "Because this land is my life. My father homesteaded it, built the first cabin with his own hands. I was born in that old house, learned to ride in these fields, brought my first wife here. Losing my sight took enough from me. I won't lose this, too." "Then we'll make sure you don't," Josie said firmly. He turned toward her, a question in his expression. "We. If you'll have me, truly, not just as a convenience but as a partner." Thomas reached for her hand, his fingers lacing through hers. "I'd be honored to have you as my wife, Josephine Brennan. Not because I need someone to keep house or because I'm desperate for companionship, but because in one day you've shown me more grace and strength than I've seen in 3 years. Because when you talk, I want to listen. Because your courage inspires me to be braver." "I'm not brave," she whispered. "You're the bravest person I know. You got on a stage and traveled 2,000 miles to start over. You're sitting here without your veil, letting the world see what you've survived. You're choosing to build a life in a hard place with a blind man. If that's not brave, I don't know what is." Josie leaned her head against his shoulder, feeling something she'd thought she'd lost forever. Peace. Belonging. Hope that maybe, just maybe, she could have a real life again. "When?" she asked softly. "As soon as you're ready," Thomas replied. "Tomorrow, next week, next month. I'm not going anywhere." Tomorrow, she decided. Let's not waste any more time. But not everyone in Copper Ridge was happy about the upcoming marriage. The next morning, as Josie was shopping for supplies in town, she encountered Garrett Pierce. He was a bull of a man, broad-shouldered and thick-necked, with cold eyes and a smile that never reached them. He cornered her in the general store, his voice loud enough to carry. "So, you're the mail-order bride Ashford brought in," he said, looking her up and down with obvious disdain. "Though I'd say brought in is generous. Looks more like he took what nobody else wanted." Josie stiffened but kept her voice level. "Mr. Pierce, I presume?" "That's right, and I'll be plain with you, lady. Thomas Ashford is a blind man trying to run a ranch he can't manage. He's going to fail, and when he does, I'll be there to take that land off his hands. Marrying him is just going to make you a widow twice as fast." "Thomas manages his ranch just fine," Josie replied coldly. "For now. But winter's coming, and winter in this territory is hard on strong men with good eyes. A cripple like Ashford won't make it, and neither will his scarred bride." He stepped closer, his voice dropping. "Save yourself the trouble, lady. Go back to wherever you came from. There's nothing for you here but hardship and heartbreak." "I think I'll take my chances," Josie said, holding her ground despite her racing heart. Pierce's face darkened. Stubborn and ugly. Ashford really did scrape the bottom of the barrel. When he loses everything, don't say I didn't warn you. He strode out, leaving Josie shaking with anger and humiliation. Several townspeople had witnessed the exchange, their faces showing various degrees of sympathy or agreement with Pierce's assessment. Margaret Sullivan appeared at her elbow. "Don't mind Garrett Pierce. He's been after Thomas's water rights for years. He'd say anything to discourage you." "He's not wrong, though," Josie said quietly. "I am scarred. Thomas is blind. We're both damaged." "Damaged?" Margaret looked genuinely shocked. "My dear, you're both survivors. There's a difference. And I've seen how Thomas lights up when he talks about you. Don't let a bully like Pierce steal that." But Pierce's words had planted seeds of doubt. That evening, when Thomas proposed they marry the next day at the small church with just the ranch hands as witnesses, Josie hesitated. "What if Pierce is right?" she asked. "What if I'm just making things harder for you?" Thomas set down the saddle leather he'd been mending by touch. "Josephine, let me tell you something about Garrett Pierce. He's a man who believes that power is everything. He sees my blindness and thinks it makes me weak. He sees your scars and thinks they make you less. But he's wrong about both of us." He stood and moved across the room with that uncanny precision, finding her position by the sound of her breathing. His hands framed her face, fingers gentle on scarred and smooth skin alike. "I was weak when I had my sight," he said. "I took things for granted. I didn't truly see my wife when I had her. I didn't appreciate the land while I could watch the sun rise over it. Losing my vision taught me what matters. And what matters, Josephine, is the content of a person's character. Their strength, their kindness, their courage. You have all of that in abundance." "But people talk," she whispered. "They stare. Pierce called us both damaged. Let them talk. Let them stare. People have been underestimating me since the accident, and they've probably been underestimating you since the fire. But we know the truth. We know what we're capable of. And together—" His smile was fierce. "Together, we're stronger than Garrett Pierce can imagine." "You really believe that?" "I know it. The question is, do you?" Josie thought about the life she'd left behind. The pitying looks, the whispers, the way people treated her like broken porcelain. The men who'd recoiled from her scars, the women who'd offered sympathy but never friendship. She'd been surviving, but not living. Here, in this hard land with this blind rancher, she'd found something else. Respect. Partnership. A man who saw her for who she truly was and loved that woman. Maybe they were both damaged. Or maybe they were both survivors finding their way back to life. "I believe it," she said finally, "and yes, I'll marry you tomorrow." The wedding was simple. The church was small, built of adobe with rough-hewn wooden pews. Besides the ranch hands, Margaret Sullivan attended, along with her husband and a few other townspeople who'd been kind. The minister, a weathered man named Reverend Howell, performed the ceremony with genuine warmth. Thomas wore his best suit, and Josie wore a simple cream-colored dress that Margaret had altered to fit her. She wore no veil. When Thomas placed his mother's gold ring on her finger, his hands were steady. When he kissed her, brief and chaste but full of promise, she felt tears slip down her cheeks, the scarred side and the smooth side alike. As they left the church, Garrett Pierce was waiting across the street, leaning against a hitching post with his arms crossed. He didn't say anything, just watched with cold eyes as they climbed into Thomas's wagon for the ride back to the ranch. "He's out there," Josie said quietly. "I know. I can feel him watching." Thomas clicked to the horses. "He's waiting for us to fail. We'll just have to disappoint him." Life on the ranch settled into a rhythm. Josie threw herself into making the house a home, scrubbing and mending and organizing. She learned to cook on the cast-iron stove, to tend the vegetable garden by the creek, to work alongside the ranch hands when needed. Thomas taught her to ride, his patient instructions helping her master the skill. She read to him in the evenings, everything from ranch ledgers to novels they borrowed from Margaret Sullivan. They worked together on the books, her eyes and his mind combining to keep the ranch accounts in order. In the quiet moments, they talked. About her childhood in Philadelphia, about his memories of the ranch before the accident, about their fears and hopes, about the future they were building together. And in the dark of their bedroom, Thomas showed her that scars didn't matter to hands that loved the person beneath them. He mapped every inch of her with tender precision, making her believe for the first time that she could be desired, cherished, beautiful. The first real test came 6 weeks after their marriage. A storm rolled in from the mountains, one of those early winter tempests that turned the desert into a frozen nightmare. The temperature dropped 30 degrees in 2 hours and sleet began to fall in sheets. Carlos rode in from checking the herd with bad news. "Part of the fence is down on the north range. Cattle are scattered. If we don't round them up before dark, we'll lose half the herd to the cold or to rustlers." Thomas stood immediately. "Saddle my horse." "Thomas, no," Josie said, fear sharp in her chest. "You can't ride in this, you can't see." "I know every inch of that land," Thomas replied, already reaching for his heavy coat. "I rode it blind for 2 years before you came. Carlos, Red, and Jacob need help, and I won't sit here while our livelihood wanders off into a storm." "Then I'm coming with you," Josie declared. "Absolutely not. It's too dangerous." "I can see. You know the land. Together, we're better than either of us alone." She grabbed her own coat, the one she'd bought for the harsh Arizona winters. "I'm your wife, Thomas. We're partners. That means I stand beside you, not behind you." For a moment he looked like he would argue. Then his expression softened. "Partners. All right, but you stay close to me. No heroics." "Says the blind man riding into a storm," she muttered, but there was pride in her voice. They rode out together, joining the ranch hands in the sleeting darkness. Thomas was right. He knew the land. Even blind, he guided his horse with confidence, calling out landmarks Josie couldn't see until they were upon them. She became his eyes, warning him of dangers, helping him navigate the treacherous ground. They found the downed fence where the cattle had pushed through, panicked by the storm. The animals were scattered across the canyon, bawling their distress. Working together, the 5 of them began the slow, cold work of gathering the herd and driving them back toward the safety of the lower pastures. It was full dark when they finally got the last steer through the makeshift fence repair. They were all soaked, half frozen, and exhausted. But they'd saved the herd. As they rode back to the ranch house, Josie, riding close to Thomas's side, she realized something. This was what partnership looked like. This was what love looked like. Not pretty words or easy promises, but standing together when the storm hit, using each other's strengths to cover each other's weaknesses. At the house, she helped Thomas inside while the ranch hands saw to the horses. She built up the fire, heated water for coffee and soup, and helped him out of his frozen clothes. They sat together by the fire, warming themselves, and Thomas pulled her close. "Thank you," he said simply, "for being my eyes out there, for being my partner." "Thank you for letting me," she replied, "for not treating me like I'm fragile." "Fragile?" He laughed. "Josephine, you're the strongest person I know. You proved that in Philadelphia, and you proved it again today. Any man who can't see that is blind in ways that have nothing to do with eyes." News of their successful cattle drive spread through Copper Ridge. The story grew in the telling, the blind rancher and his scarred wife working together to save their herd. Some told it with admiration, others with disbelief. But no one could deny that Thomas Ashford's ranch was thriving. Garrett Pierce, however, wasn't finished. 3 months into their marriage, during a bitter cold snap in January, their main water source suddenly dried up. The spring that fed the creek slowed to a trickle, then stopped entirely. Without water, the ranch would die. Carlos investigated and returned with grim news. "Someone's diverted the spring upstream. It's on Pierce's land now." Thomas's face went hard. "That's illegal. That water's been flowing through this property for 50 years. It's protected by law." "Pierce doesn't care about law," Jacob said quietly. "He'll say it happened naturally, that he's just using what's on his land." "Then we'll take him to court," Josie said firmly. But the local judge, they soon learned, was in Pierce's pocket. The hearing was a formality. Judge Morrison ruled that without proof of deliberate diversion, and since the spring originated on Pierce's property, he was within his rights to utilize it as he saw fit. As they left the courthouse, Pierce was waiting. "Told you that you'd fail, Ashford. Now you've got 2 choices. Sell to me at my price or watch your cattle die of thirst. Winter will be over in a few months and you won't have a ranch left to worry about." Thomas stood very still, his blind eyes fixed somewhere past Pierce's shoulder. When he spoke, his voice was calm but hard as iron. "I'll die before I sell to you." "Might come to that," Pierce said with an ugly laugh. "Though I expect your ugly little wife will come crawling to me first, begging to make a deal." Josie stepped forward before Thomas could respond. "Mr. Pierce, I've been called ugly before, by people far more important than you. It doesn't hurt any more because I know something you don't. I know that beauty is more than skin deep. I know that a scar worn in service of others is a badge of honor, not shame. And I know that you're the one who's truly ugly, because your deformity is on the inside where it can't be fixed." Pierce's face went purple with rage, but before he could respond, a crowd began to gather. They'd heard the exchange. Margaret Sullivan was there, and the Reverend and a dozen other townspeople. Margaret spoke up, her voice carrying. "Garrett Pierce, you're a bully and a thief. Everyone knows you diverted that water illegally. The fact that Judge Morrison is too crooked to say so doesn't make it right." "This is none of your business, woman," Pierce snarled. "It's all our business," Reverend Howell said firmly. "This town was built by people helping each other, not by powerful men crushing their neighbors. Thomas Ashford is a good man who's worked hard to keep his ranch going despite his disability. If you think we're going to stand by while you steal his water, you're mistaken." One by one, other voices joined in. The blacksmith, the general store owner, even some of Pierce's own ranch hands looked uncomfortable. Pierce found himself surrounded by the disapproval of the entire town. "This isn't over," he spat, pushing through the crowd toward his horse. But it was. That night, someone, no one ever admitted who, rode up into the mountains and redirected the spring back to its original course. By morning, water was flowing through Thomas's creek again. More than that, the townspeople organized a rotation to keep watch on the spring, ensuring Pierce couldn't divert it again without witnesses. They brought supplies, helped with repairs Pierce's sabotage had caused, and made it clear that Thomas and Josie weren't alone. "Why are they helping us?" Josie asked one evening as she and Thomas sat on their porch, watching another sunset he couldn't see but could feel in the warmth on his face. "Because you stood up to peers," Thomas said. "Because people like an underdog. Because we showed them that being different doesn't mean being weak." He reached for her hand. "You did that, Josephine. You showed them that scars, visible or invisible, don't define us. Our actions do. Our character does. We did it together," she corrected. "You taught me that I don't have to hide, that my scars are part of my story, not the whole story." "And you taught me that losing my sight didn't mean losing my life," Thomas replied. "You gave me back my future, Josephine. You gave me back hope." They sat in comfortable silence as the desert evening settled around them. Inside the house, a pot of stew simmered on the stove, filling the air with savory warmth. In the barn, horses munched contentedly on hay. In the pastures, cattle grazed on winter grass. It wasn't a grand life, it wasn't an easy life, but it was theirs, built together one day at a time. Spring came to the desert in an explosion of color, the canyons filled with wildflowers, painting the red rocks in shades of yellow, purple, and white. Josie described every bloom to Thomas, and he taught her their names and uses. Together they walked their land, and she became his eyes while he showed her the secrets of the desert that only long familiarity could reveal. On a warm April morning, Josie discovered she was pregnant. She told Thomas that evening on the porch, taking his hand and placing it on her still flat stomach. "A baby," he whispered, wonder in his voice. "Our baby," she confirmed. "Due in early winter." Thomas pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. "Do you think—" He hesitated. "Do you think the child will mind having a father who can't see?" "I think the child will be lucky to have a father who sees what truly matters," Josie said firmly. "Who teaches that character is more important than appearance? Who shows that disability doesn't mean inability? Who loves without reservation and sees beauty in unexpected places?" "And a mother who's the bravest woman in the territory," Thomas added, kissing her forehead, her nose, and finally her lips. Gentle on the scarred side, gentle on the smooth side. Equal devotion to all of her. That summer, Garrett Pierce sold his ranch and left Copper Ridge. The rumor was that his own dishonesty had caught up with him, that he'd lost everything in a failed cattle deal back east. His departure felt like the final chapter closing on their struggle. When their daughter was born in December, during a gentle snow that dusted the desert white, they named her Grace. Because Grace was what had brought them together. Grace to survive their separate tragedies. Grace to find each other. Grace to build a life that defied everyone's expectations. Little Grace grew up running through the canyons, riding horses before she could properly walk, learning the land from her father who knew every inch by heart. She never questioned that her father couldn't see or that her mother bore scars. To her, they were simply Mama and Papa, the two people who loved her most in all the world. And when Grace was old enough to ask about her mother's veil, which hung on a peg by the door but was never worn, Josie told her about the fire, about the children she saved, about coming west to start over, about finding a man who saw beauty in unexpected places. "You're the most beautiful mama in the world," Grace declared with a child's fierce certainty. "Your father thinks so too," Josie said, catching Thomas's smile from across the room. "That's because I see clearly," Thomas said, pulling both his girls into his arms. "Sometimes the eyes that see best are the ones that look with the heart." Years later, when travelers passed through Copper Ridge, they'd sometimes hear the story of the blind rancher and his scarred bride. Some versions made them sound like legends, larger than life. But the truth was simpler and more profound. They were just two people who'd been broken by life and put back together by love. Two people who'd learned that beauty isn't in perfection, but in perseverance. That strength isn't in what you can do alone, but in what you can build together. and on warm desert evenings you could find them on their porch, older now, but no less devoted. Thomas would describe the sunset from memory, painting it in words. Josie would add the details he couldn't see, making the picture complete. Their children and grandchildren would gather around, and the story would continue. The story of how a woman everyone mocked for her scars met a man who couldn't see them but loved her anyway. Or, perhaps more accurately, loved her because he saw past them to the warrior beneath. The story of how they proved that real beauty lives in the soul, and real vision comes from the heart. If this story of courage, love, and seeing beyond the surface touched your heart, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Share your thoughts in the comments about what you think makes someone truly beautiful. Check out our other stories of unexpected love and second chances in the playlist. Your support means everything and helps us bring more of these tales to life. Thank you for watching, and remember, the most beautiful love stories are often written on scarred hearts by hands that refuse to see darkness. Until next time, may you always see the beauty in the broken, and may you find someone who sees it in you